Chapter 5. Of the Wings of Atalanta. O black boy of Atalanta! But half was spoken, the slaves' chains and the masters alike are broken, the one curse of the races held both in tether, they are rising, all are rising, the black and white together. Whittier. South of the north, yet north of the south, lies the city of 100 hills, peering out from the shadows of the past into the promise of the future. I have seen her in the morning, when the first flush of day had half roused her, she lay gray and still on the crimson soil of Georgia, then the blue smoke began to curl from her chimneys. The tinkle of bell and scream of whistle broke the silence, the rattle and roar of busy life slowly gathered and swelled, until the seething whirl of the city seemed a strange thing in a sleepy land. Once, they say, even Atalanta slept dull and drowsy at the foothills of the Alleghanies, until the iron baptism of war awakened her with its sullen waters, aroused and maddened her, and left her listening to the sea. And the sea cried to the hills, and the hills answered the sea, till the city rose like a widow and cast away her weeds, and toiled for her daily bread, toiled steadily, toiled cunningly, perhaps with some bitterness, with a touch of réclame, and yet with real earnestness and real sweat. It is a hard thing to live haunted by the ghost of an untrue dream, to see the wide vision of empire fade into real ashes and dirt, to feel the pang of the conquered, and yet know that with all the bad that fell on one black day, something was vanquished that deserved to live, something killed that injustice had not dared to die, to know that with the right that triumphed something of wrong, something sordid and mean, something less than the broadest and best. All this is bitter hard, and many a man and city and people have found in it excuse for sulking and brooding and listless waiting. Such are not men of the sturdier make, they of Atalanta turned resolutely toward the future, and that future held aloft vistas of purple and gold. Atalanta, queen of the cotton kingdom, Atalanta, gateway to the land of the sun, Atalanta, the new Lachesis, spinner of web and woof for the world. So the city crowned her 100 hills with factories, and stored her shops with cunning handiwork, and stretched long iron ways to greet the busy Mercury in his coming. And the nation talked of her striving. Perhaps Atalanta was not christened for the winged maiden of dull Boeotia. You know the tale, how swarthy Atalanta, tall and wild, would marry only him who outraced her, and how the wily Hippomenes laid 3 apples of gold in the way. She fled like a shadow, paused, startled over the first apple, but even as he stretched his hand, fled again, hovered over the second, then, slipping from his hot grasp, flew over river, vale, and hill. But as she lingered over the third, his arms fell round her, and looking on each other, the blazing passion of their love profaned the sanctuary of love, and they were cursed. If Atalanta be not named for Atalanta, she ought to have been. Atalanta is not the first or the last maiden whom greed of gold has led to defile the temple of love, and not maids alone, but men in the race of life, sink from the high and generous ideals of youth to the gambler's code of the bourse, and in all our nation's striving is not the gospel of work befouled by the gospel of pay? So common is this that one half think it normal, so unquestioned, that we almost fear to question if the end of racing is not gold, if the aim of man is not rightly to be rich. And if this is the fault of America, how dire a danger lies before a new land and a new city, lest Atalanta, stooping for mere gold, shall find that gold accursed. It was no maiden's idle whim that started this hard racing. A fearful wilderness lay about the feet of that city after the war, feudalism, poverty, the rise of the Third Estate, serfdom, the rebirth of law and order, and above and between all, the veil of race. How heavy a journey for weary feet! What wings must Atalanta have to flit over all this hollow and hill, through sour wood and sullen water, and by the red waste of sun-baked clay? How fleet must Atalanta be if she will not be tempted by gold to profane the sanctuary? The sanctuary of our fathers has, to be sure, few gods, some sneer, all too few. There is the thrifty Mercury of New England, Pluto of the North, and Ceres of the West, and there, too, is the half-forgotten Apollo of the South, under whose aegis the maiden ran, and as she ran she forgot him, even as there in Boeotia Venus was forgot. She forgot the old ideal of the Southern gentleman, that New World air of the grace and courtliness of patrician, knight, and noble, forgot his honor with his foibles, his kindliness with his carelessness, and stooped to apples of gold, to men busier and sharper, thriftier and more unscrupulous. Golden apples are beautiful. I remember the lawless days of boyhood, when orchards in crimson and gold tempted me over fence and field. And, 2. The merchant who has dethroned the planter is no despicable parvenu. Work and wealth are the mighty levers to lift this old new land. Thrift and toil and saving are the highways to new hopes and new possibilities. And yet the warning is needed lest the wily Hippomenes tempt Atalanta to thinking that golden apples are the goal of racing, and not mere incidents by the way. Atalanta must not lead the South to dream of material prosperity as the touchstone of all success. Already the fatal might of this idea is beginning to spread. It is replacing the finer type of Southerner with vulgar money-getters. It is burying the sweeter beauties of Southern life beneath pretense and ostentation. For every social ill, the panacea of wealth has been urged, wealth to overthrow the remains of the slave feudalism, wealth to raise the cracker third estate, wealth to employ the black serfs, and the prospect of wealth to keep them working, wealth as the end and aim of politics, and as the legal tender for law and order, and, finally, instead of truth, beauty, and goodness, wealth as the ideal of the public school. Not only is this true in the world which Atalanta typifies, but it is threatening to be true of a world beneath and beyond that world, the black world beyond the veil. Today it makes little difference to Atalanta, to the South, what the Negro thinks or dreams or wills. In the sole life of the land he is today, and naturally will long remain, unthought of, half forgotten, and yet when he does come to think and will and do for himself, and let no man dream that day will never come, then the part he plays will not be one of sudden learning, but words and thoughts he has been taught to lisp in his race childhood. Today the ferment of his striving towards self-realization is to the strife of the white world like a wheel within a wheel. Beyond the veil are smaller but like problems of ideals, of leaders and the lead, of serfdom, of poverty, of order and subordination, and, through all, the veil of race. Few know of these problems, few who know notice them, and yet there they are, awaiting student, artist, and seer, a field for somebody sometime to discover. Hither has the temptation of Hippomenes penetrated, already in this smaller world, which now indirectly and anon directly must influence the larger for good or ill. The habit is forming of interpreting the world in dollars. The old leaders of Negro opinion, and the little groups where there is a Negro social consciousness, are being replaced by new. Neither the black preacher nor the black teacher leads as he did 2 decades ago. Into their places are pushing the farmers and gardeners, the well-paid porters and artisans, the businessmen, all those with property and money. And with all this change, so curiously parallel to that of the other world, goes to the same inevitable change in ideals. The South laments today the slow, steady disappearance of a certain type of Negro, the faithful, courteous slave of other days, with his incorruptible honesty and dignified humility. He is passing away just as surely as the old type of Southern gentleman is passing, and from not dissimilar causes. The sudden transformation of a fair far-off ideal of freedom into the hard reality of breadwinning and the consequent deification of bread. In the black world, the preacher and teacher embodied once the ideals of this people, the strife for another and a juster world, the vague dream of righteousness, the mystery of knowing. But today the danger is that these ideals, with their simple beauty and weird inspiration, will suddenly sink to a question of cash and a lust for gold. Here stands this black young Atalanta, girding herself for the race that must be run, and if her eyes be still toward the hills and sky as in the days of old, then we may look for noble running. But what if some ruthless or wily or even thoughtless Hippomenes lay golden apples before her? What if the Negro people be wooed from a strife for righteousness, from a love of knowing, to regard dollars as the be-all and end-all of life? What if to the mammonism of America be added the rising mammonism of the reborn South? And the mammonism of this South be reinforced by the budding mammonism of its half-wakened black millions? Whither, then, is the New World quest of goodness and beauty and truth gone glimmering? Must this and that fair flower of freedom which, despite the jeers of latter-day striplings, sprung from our fathers' blood? Must that too degenerate into a dusty quest of gold, and to lawless lust with Hippomenes?